Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party, home to great podcasts such as Missing Frames, Aggressive Negotiations, Nerd Nuptial, The Outpost, and Time and Space. So whatever your nerd pleasure, this is the location for you. Speaking of locations, our main topic of discussion today is going to be film locations. So to complete our Kirsty and Phil of the podcast world, and I do realise that is quite a niche reference for US audiences, it's my co-host Lee Hutchison. How are you?
It's very brave as well when most of our audience listeners bizarrely come from America, so it must be true what they say about listening to Scottish accents. You know, when you think that, like, I bizarrely looked at like our stats today, and like 53% of our listeners come from America, then it's the UK, then it's like Canada and places like that. And then you would think with our podcast, there should be no excuse for Americans having really dodgy Scottish accents in movies. We were doing a public service for Americans here that they seem to be disregarding with every movie.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that recent clip of Merida from Brave in the Wreck-It Ralph 2 trailer caused a lot of controversy over here. That, yeah, we apparently still only have one accent, which is essentially a very strong Ouija accent. But,
always the case.
But what can you do? But yeah, if for any of our US or non-UK listeners, Kirsty and Phil are the hosts of a show on Channel 4 here called Location, 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 which helps young couples who are struggling to get a foothold on the housing ladder to find their dream home. So that's why I was going with that one anyway. So, but first of all, we're going to have a quick catch-up, because it's been a while since we've chatted. We've been off to various places, but we've also watched a lot of films, and you know, time is short, so we ain't got time to bleed, but I think we both got time to talk about The Predator, because we've both seen that one. So do you want to kick us off with your thoughts on Shane Black's return to the big screen and the return to the Predator franchise, I guess, as well?
Yeah, the idea of Shane Black making a Predator movie was quite exciting on paper, and it's been probably the main thing that's kind of made me kind of hopeful about this movie, even when the trailers came out and it's kind of landed with a bit of a damp squib. And, you know, you're watching the trailers and you're like, there's nothing in this working for me whatsoever, I'm not excited. And then sort of some of the reviews started to come in, especially at the Toronto International Film Festival, and I always get a bit of a chuckle when a big movie like that plays at a sort of international film festival. And there was things that I'd seen, some kind of comments coming out about its attitude towards people with autism, for example, and you know, there was a big commotion about the hiring of a former sex predator in a movie as well, which kind of created a big hullabaloo as well. So it's one of these movies, it wasn't exactly people, I don't think we're too excited for this movie, and I think that was kind of reflected in the double bill I went to see. I went to see a double bill of this and the Miseducation of Cameron Post, and The Predator had, you know, admittedly had more screenings of this movie on, but it was half empty on kind of opening night at best, and it just sort of felt flat in the cinema, where something like Miseducation of Cameron Post was pretty much packed, really, and you could feel a real audience connection with the movie. And Predator for me was just a mess. Like, I enjoyed the stuff with the loonies. They were quite funny, quite engaging characters, and you know, there's definitely some moments of humor there, but for me, like, the action, the dialogue, the inventiveness of the movie was just all flat. Like, the main character, I can't remember the name of the actor, but I thought he was genuinely dreadful. He was so uninspiring as a lead for a movie like this, and I find that surprising, because I always associate Shane Black movies with strong acting leads. There wasn't anything like this in at all, and it was just a really forgettable movie that seems to have just been butchered in kind of the edit process, the production process. And I think there was Screen Rant did a really good article breaking down kind of how this film was messed around, different concepts, things in leaked scripts, and yeah, it's definitely in the worst of the year list for me, along things like kind of Solo and Romeo and Juliet. It was really poor, and I expect better from Shane Black.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that comment just alone is going to cause ripples among the Nerd Party, saying that Solo's one of the worst of the year, because there's a lot of people on this network here that genuinely think it's one of the best of the year. But I agree with you that The Predator for me is one of the worst films that I have seen this year. And I was probably the same sort of prospect of Shane Black coming off of, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Iron Man 3, and The Nice Guys, going back into the Predator franchise, where he started off as an actor and probably script polisher on site at the time. And, the prospect of him doing this was just so great. And then, like you say, the first couple of trailers came out, and there was nothing in those trailers that suggested that Shane Black was making this film. And then finally, about 5 days before the film came out, there suddenly was this trailer that had sort of some of the dialogue between the loonies and stuff like that, and everyone started to go, oh, okay, there it is. Maybe there is a Shane Black film hiding under there. But again, this is a film, that went to reshoots and stuff like that in order to fix the third act. And to be honest, I'm not sure. I think they've made it even worse. The editing is all over the place. I've got no idea what certain decisions were made. This is a film it's a hatchet job, I think, is the fair enough description of what has ended up on screen. There's sort of bits. There's the talk of obviously there was the Olivia Munn thing that came out just before the Toronto premiere, that apparently she was in a scene with someone who was committed sex offences and was convicted of that, and so that scene was excised. But then what it meant is we got basically no introduction to her character, and she was just whisked off straight away into this adventure. It's then unfortunate the first line that Sterling K. Brown says to her is, "Do you want to meet a predator?" And there was like a sharp intake of breath actually in the cinema screen, actually, so clearly a lot of people were aware of the story when I saw it. And then there's bits like where she's like talking to the guys about, when I was in the Predator base, I was naked and he left me alone. And I'm like, okay, she's saying that. Clearly that's going to come back in the third act, and for some reason, what are they all going to have to strip off naked in order to avoid the Predator? I don't know where this is going, but they never got referenced again, so we don't know what that is. There's characters seem to come and go to this point, and this is spoilers. I still to this day do not know what happened to the Sterling K. Brown's character in the end. I was expecting him and Olivia Munn to pop back up in the final scene, and there was nothing. There was no, there was nothing that wound up their stories or their characters, and I was just like, have I missed something? I mean, I didn't fall asleep during the film. I know it was bad, but I didn't fall asleep. I was paying attention, but for some reason, that just completely skipped me by. Did you see what happened to him?
Yeah, I didn't quite see him get. I sort of thought at one point that he died in sort of the woodland battle, really, when it sort of seemed like a couple were being taken out at one time. Yeah, like I was like, oh right, as I think he died there. Maybe I wasn't too sure, so I just sort of assumed that he had died in that kind of onslaught.
Okay, because they sort of set up this whole thing that sort of Boyd Holbrook, who was in Logan and is the main star in this one, that his character and Sterling K. Brown were going to have a sort of face off at the end, and it never happened, and that was another storyline that sort of petered out. And for me, I mean, some of the characterization is very, very poor, particularly probably Thomas Jane and Jacob Tremblay. One has Tourette's, and then Jacob Tremblay has autism, and the introduction of these characters was basically using traits that they used back in the 80s. It's just basically shouting out swear words to indicate that you've got Tourette's, and then sort of basically doing a sort of minor Dustin Hoffman routine in the first 5 minutes to basically say this kid has autism and look, he's very good with gadgets. And I thought it was just very sort of lazy, sloppy sort of screenwriting, and that's why I was very surprised it was coming from Shane Black. I mean, there is decent aspects to it. I thought Trevante Rhodes was good. Keegan-Michael Key's got some good moments, but for me it just sort of fell really flat and sort of felt spineless compared to some of the original ones in terms of the action and stuff like that. I think the decision to go pretty much with a fully CG villain towards the end sort of killed it for me. And the part of the joy of the first Predator film and aspects of Predator 2 and Predators was the fact that the villains, these predators, were really tall guys in suits. You could actually see them fighting, and it felt more real and dangerous compared to a giant sort of CG predator and his predator dogs, which again was another storyline which kind of never got wound up properly.
Yeah, they seem to really milk that there was these dogs and then just leave it at that. Like, it gets kind of put into like the back of a truck at one point, and that's that. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's like that dog, because it was a vicious dog, but then it got shot in the head and then became really sort of simple and docile, was it? I mean,
Yeah,
again,
that was
I'm not
odd.
really sure what was happening there. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that if it was a George Lucas film, you'd be expecting to see plushy predator dogs on sale, but I don't think there's going to be much merchandising for it. So yeah, I mean, just a huge disappointment. And the scene at the end, I mean, we'll go into spoilers here because I want to talk about the scene. I want to sort of get your reaction of what you were expecting, because at the end there's this new, back at the lab, they're sort of investigating the predator sort of technology that has come off the ship, and there's talk of this escape pod which has been sealed off, and Jacob Tremblay's managed to basically decipher the predator language and calls it the predator killer. And now there was two separate moments where I thought, ooh, hang on, this could be really exciting. And I'd be interested to see if you had similar ideas. One, I thought it's going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger inside, and he's going to come out. They've basically captured Arnold, and it's basically he's been kept in this sort of escape pod thing, and he's going to get thawed out, and he's the predator killer. I thought, ooh, that could be really exciting. Or my second option was it was going to be an alien egg, and basically, because the aliens are very good at killing predators, and you know they were going to infect him, and then instead we got some sort of Iron Man style predator suit that a human can wear to fight them, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and it's so clearly crying out for a sequel, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't see it happening either. And I think, I can't remember which Predator movie it was. I think it was Alien vs. Predator Requiem, where you see sort of more of the Predator home world. I somehow don't think one sort of armoured Predator suit is going to make much of a difference in a war like this. And kind of, obviously, while we're kind of talking spoilers, like, that final line is so incredibly flat, where it's like, that's my new suit. And then it's kind of like, pause, bang, credits, and it's like, oh, that's... Yeah, I thought it was going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or something stupid like that, to be honest. I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. But I never really kind of was that invested in what this like thing was going to be, and I really don't see how that's going to turn the tide in global warming, to be honest. I think we've got our better chance with windmills.
Yeah, I know, there was that very sort of strange environmental climate change subplot sort of thing going around, that apparently there's been more predator visits over the years, because the world's getting hotter and predators only hunt in the hottest environments. But yeah, that was kind of just sort of, again, another thing that came and went, along with the casting of Jake Busey, Guy Busey's son, who appeared in Predator 2, and he's got the same character's surname, so it's clearly that character's son, but again, doesn't get mentioned. It's clearly like there's a different version of this film somewhere. I think there's Shane Black's ideal version, and basically he gave it to the studio, and the studio went, no, we want something a bit more, I don't know what rating it got in America. It might have been like a PG-13 or something. I think they basically hacked it down to make it, to try and get as wide an audience as possible and sort of play it safe. And yeah, no, it's a stinker.
It was an
Absolute
R rating
stinker.
in America. So
was it actually still
there's
an
no
R rating?
excuse,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no excuse for this monumental failure. And I mean, the third act is so dark and dingy in that forest that you can hardly see what's going on, and most of the kills are sort of CG, and there's no point. I mean, most of these characters, you look at them and go, okay, yeah, no, the Predator's going to dispatch all of them easily. At least in the first Predator, you thought, well, these guys are genuinely tough. Jesse Ventura's a big guy. Carl Weathers clearly has biceps because of that. There's nothing like that iconic shot in the original Predator, the two doing that stupid handshake. Dylan, you son of a bitch. There's no quotable. I can't remember any quotable lines apart from the terrible moment where they said, "Get to the choppers," and it's just then they get a shot of some motorbikes, and I'm like, and yeah, no.
Yeah, it's one of these ones. It's been if this is the movie to kind of kickstart the autumn season. It's a bit of a bum note, but thankfully there are good movies out there just now.
There are indeed, and thankfully I have seen a couple in the last couple of weeks. One of them I've seen for me the 5-star, one of the best films of the year, Cold War. I've seen that.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm glad that you've finally seen it.
Yep. For me, it's basically sort of Casablanca meets La La Land, but directed by Ingmar Bergman, is the shortest way I can sum up that movie. And it's one that probably got a very small, limited release, but it is available on video on demand and stuff like that. So it's one which I highly, highly recommend. Did you catch that one at the festival, or was it?
No, I didn't, because it was such a last-minute addition. I think it was replacing... I can't remember the name of the movie, but I think it was replacing Makeup. And then, yeah, they announced that this movie was going to be coming, but then it was never put on sort of the press schedules or, hey, this movie is actually replacing that in that slot. So I never really got the chance to see it, and it was kind of came in sort of so last minute. I never really had the chance. So it would have been interesting to actually view that in the kind of the prism of that movie at the time, but then I've kind of had to make do with like, here's all this hype for it, and I don't know whether that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. I would have probably have liked to have seen it without any hype.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's still managed to live up to the hype, and it's about 88 minutes long, but it just breezes by, and you get through so much in that short space of time. I mean, it's basically one relationship tracked across about sort of 20 years or something. It's just incredible. The chemistry between the two leads is utterly fantastic, and yeah, no, it's I think it's my wife's favorite film of the year as well so far. So
yeah, it really does deserve the high praise. It would have just been interesting to have kind of watched it when just sort of like when it was just sort of come out of Cannes, it had won a bit of an award. It was still sort of kind of bubbling over to what it would have been like to watch that without all this suspense, perhaps.
Exactly, to go in Cold War.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. So what else have you been seeing in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, kind of at the cinema. Like I've kind of at home personally. I've kind of continued my 52 films by women. So the kind of films I've watched directed by women. So if you're looking to add to your own lists, I watched Ginger and Rosa, The Virgin Suicides, 2 Days in Paris, Somewhere, The Fits, Appropriate Behaviour, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, The Spy Who Loved Me at the Cinema, and The Love Witch. So it's been kind of a busy kind of 2 weeks. But in terms of new releases at the cinema, I've seen Upgrade. I finally got around to seeing The Spy Who Dumped Me after kind of coming back from Vienna and Budapest, so it was quite nice to see those films, and American Animals. And just last night I got a chance to see Sunshine on a 35mm print, hosted by Irvin Welsh at the Film House, which was fantastic. But for me, American Animals and The Miseducation of Cameron Post were fantastic films. I know you've seen American Animals, I think, but I don't think you've seen Cameron Post yet, have you? Oh yes, you have actually.
No,
I read your review.
The other way around, yeah. No, I've seen Cameron Post, which I thought was excellent, but I still need to catch American Animals, which I'm hopefully going to do at the weekend before it disappears in Aberdeen. But no, Cameron Post I thought was fantastic. I thought it was like a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for the sort of modern generation, even though it's set in the 90s, but it's a sort of timeless film that, it's a period piece, but the story of it and what happens is still incredibly relevant, and features probably the best performance that Chloe Grace Moretz has delivered so far. I mean, I think in my review I was talking about how when she sort of first appeared in sort of Kick-Ass and Let Me In, I thought that she had the potential to become like the next sort of Natalie Portman or Jodie Foster, that sort of potential, and she hadn't really lived up to it, in sort of films like The Fifth Wave and Hugo and stuff like that. But this is the first film that's really sort of shown that she has got proper acting chops, and she could go on to do great things. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she does in Suspiria as well. But I mean, the entire cast is fantastic. When Jennifer Ehle came on, I thought it was a young Meryl Streep. I thought she looks so much like Meryl. So if they ever do a biopic of Meryl Streep, they should cast Jennifer Ehle, because she's, I guess, the Nurse Ratched of the film. Mm-hmm. And it's, in certain aspects, it's like a horror film, but there's no real sort of moments of gore or stuff like that. It's just pure sort of psychological, emotional abuse on these children who are being told that they're evil and they're different and they need to change, or God will hate them and stuff like that. And it's like, no, they don't. And it's just heartbreaking to see, the effect that it has on some of them. But thankfully, some of them decide that, they're going to forge their own path. So.
Yeah, what I loved most about the movie was I kind of expected with a movie like this to sort of be sort of a story of rebellion, that they kind of overcome all these different reverends and pastors at the camp, and they lead some, like all the kind of tropes you expect with sort of a movie like this. But what I liked about it was that it was really a slice of life, that the characters that we have at the beginning, they don't particularly change. They are confident in who they are at a young age. Cameron and Jane and I forget the guy, but yeah, they don't change. They stay who they are. They believe in themselves, their sexuality. That's never in question at any point. Sometimes they question perhaps their relationships a little bit, but they're never who they are as gay or bisexual. And then kind of without kind of going too much into spoilers, like that kind of peak of what you would expect in rebellion doesn't sort of happen. It just is a slice of life, that this was just a moment in time captured from them going to this camp. And I'd love to kind of follow these characters and where they go afterwards. It doesn't feel like it's a shut story, and it shouldn't with people at these young age. And I think a film like this, I'd love to hear what kind of young audience think of it. And I think with the director Desiree Akavan, she did Appropriate Behavior, which is a bit more of a sort of an indie darling movie. It's very much got a kind of that type of audience. With this, it's kind of while it may not get a mainstream audience, it's built to kind of cater to those kinds of people, that if you're gay, lesbian, whatever, like you could probably relate to this movie in some way. And it was quite interesting. I hope it doesn't come across I'm judging, but at the kind of the second screening I was at, there was a lot of kind of people there with someone of the same sex. I don't know whether they were there with a partner or anything like that, but it was kind of nice to think that could be the case, that it's definitely bringing in this kind of audience. And I know I said it when we talked about Hearts Beat Loud, but it was good to see Sasha Lane continuing her career trajectory going upwards. So I really enjoyed it. And I think when the biggest rebellion scene in this is singing a Four Non Blondes song, like that's really good in my book, and I think it really did deserve winning kind of the Sundance award that it did. And I'm excited to see where they all go next.
Yeah, no, I mean, that moment for me was one of the highlights of the film. And that song is, I mean, as Chloe Moretz does it in the thing, it is one of those songs that you cannot sing without doing it in the voice of the woman who's singing. Mm-hmm. She's got such a certain pronunciation of certain words that you just end up singing it that way. And for me, it was like one of those moments, like from Almost Famous, the sort of Tiny Dancer bus sing along. It's just like one of those cathartic releases that they just needed at that moment. And I mean, yeah, when I saw it on a Friday afternoon around about 4:00, and the screening was around a third full, which for the local independent cinema is actually very, very good, especially for that sort of time of day. So I think it is finding an audience. I mean, if you just look at the poster, it's clearly being marketed in the same way as Call Me By Your Name. It's got the same sort of blue background and the same yellow font writing. And we certainly have seen, with Love, Simon as well this year, that there is a greater proportion of sort of LGBTQ films coming into the mainstream and getting a wider release, and it's great to see that. And I really do hope that this one finds an audience, because I thought it was just fantastic. And like you say, it'd be interesting to see where the characters go next, because there's a film, the sort of final shot of the film reminded me of the final shot of another film, which was about from the 60s, which was about sort of teenagers trying to find out who they are and where they're going. I won't name the film, but because it would sort of give away the sort of the ending. But for me, it sort of really reminded of something like that, especially how the sort of music cut out. It's just the sort of point where it makes you question maybe what the final decisions and stuff like that, but I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the kind of, it's been one of the standout films for me this year, and probably one of the stressed I've ever been, was American Animals. It's a film that kind of seemed to come out of nowhere kind of the past month or two, with a lot of high praise, some exciting trailers. What did you make of it?
I actually haven't seen American Animals yet. I still need to catch it, but I'm much more excited about it than I was about a month ago, because all I'd seen of it was the sort of stuff with Evan Peters and Barry Keoghan from Dunkirk and stuff like that. I just thought it was a straight adaptation of a true life story, but I've only now sort of recently discovered that it's actually blending sort of talking to the original criminals and stuff like that. And when because I didn't realize it was done by the same guy who did The Imposter, which is a fantastic documentary, which came out around about maybe 6 years ago now, but it just one of those crazy sort of true life stories that now would appear on Netflix or on release. But it's great to see these sort of films still getting a cinematic release. But I think it's somewhere like Netflix that this sort of story would really sort of find its audience, I think.
Yeah, one film that we've definitely both seen, and I think you probably liked it a bit more than me, was Upgrade. If you were looking for your fill of reloading arm guns, this is your second movie of the summer, really.
Exactly. This is a movie where someone literally cocks his arm as a gun, and I think I enjoyed it a lot more than you did. But it's a film which, unfortunately for Venom, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, this is the film that Venom should be, and I have a feeling it will end up being the better Venom film of this year.
Yes.
The fact that it's got a man who ends up talking to something inside him which gives him essentially superpowers. So
yeah, it's one of these films that seems to have really got a lot of I think it just last week kind of arrived out in America on kind of digital download and Blu-ray, and it seems kind of over the kind of course of the summer, especially coming out of America, it's been like hype for this. It's like one of these films you've got to see. And it sometimes seems with movies like this, the hype can kind of, it can sometimes get ratcheted up just maybe that bit further than it kind of should with some things, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And this was a film, it was a bit frustrating that it was getting such a limited release here in the UK. I only was able to see it at the View Cinema that was doing like 2 screenings a day, but that screening I went to was packed with people that clearly heard the buzz. Yeah, no,
I was the same. I had to go to the Cineworld at the beach, which for Aberdeen is basically we've got 2 Cineworlds, and this is the multiplex which gets the smaller releases, and so I had to make my way down. I had to walk an extra half hour basically to go and see this film one evening, and I mean it got a great reaction in the screening I was in. The first fight scene, I basically caused several people to sort of whoop and cheer at the end of it. So any sort of film which can cause that sort of audible, visceral reaction in a crowd is doing it's a good thing. But yeah, for me, I just thought it was like a hark back to sort of like the 80s, 90s, early sort of sci-fi sort of action films. And yeah, I mean, I really liked it, but I could see why it's probably not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah, but I still liked it nonetheless. It was a bit sort of too predictable for me. I mean, admittedly, there's a bit of a twist on the twist, but it kind of always felt like it was going sort of in that direction for me. And it was an enjoyable film. It's it had some fantastic kill scenes, and for the type of movie it is, I can imagine it playing well with sort of like a kind of midnight audience, if that makes sense. And I enjoyed it for what it was, but it wasn't. Maybe I was a bit too expecting maybe a bit more after all that kind of American hype. Yeah,
I think over here in the UK, I think it was a film which it played at like a midnight screening at Fright Fest in London.
Yes,
and I think those films always get like, even the terrible films get like great reactions, because it's at midnight on a Friday and everyone's slightly drunk and stuff like that. But I mean, what did you make of Logan Marshall Green, aka the B-list Tom Hardy in the role? Because there were several times I was watching this and thinking it's Tom Hardy, and then I had to remind myself it's not Tom Hardy, which makes the Venom comparisons even stronger. But I actually thought he was very good in the role, and it's the first sort of film I've seen him in that I've thought that, because I didn't think he had much of a presence in Prometheus. So
no, he didn't have kind of much in the way of kind of presence. That he definitely is the sort of cheap man's Tom Hardy in terms of looks as well. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I think he's been picking some interesting choices, and I think a movie like this is a really good calling card for us. So if you wanted to kind of watch more action movies and such like that he's been in, and I kind of think of something like The Invitation. I think that's on Netflix, and he is fantastic in that movie as well. And it seems that with kind of The Invitation, Upgrade, sort of smaller roles in something like Spider-Man Man, Prometheus, Snowden, etc. That he's picking interesting projects. He's just waiting for perhaps that movie like, Upgrade, where it is that calling card and it kind of breaks out for him. And I'm excited to see kind of where he will go. And I think in a kind of couple of years' time, I think he's going to be a bit of a staple of sort of bigger and perhaps action movies.
Yeah, no, you've actually just reminded me of The Invitation, which, if anyone hasn't seen it yet, please go onto Netflix, because it's one of those films that just, turn on in an evening, you're looking for something and this thing comes up and you go, okay, yeah, I'll give that a go. And it's genuinely like one of those sort of really surprising, fantastic films that, is you can find on Netflix. So I think I did a double bill of that and Coherence one night, which was like a very odd double bill of, dinner parties gone wrong that you find on these streaming services. So
that's a top 5 in itself.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of top 5s, we're going to be talking about our top 5 film locations today, and this is inspired by your latest holiday, where you were, I think, over in Budapest, but took a little road trip up to Vienna for the day, because to visit some of the locations from one of your favourite films. Could you tell us all where you went and what film it was?
Absolutely, yeah. Like I was kind of away in Budapest, not checking out any sort of the locations from Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, but the opportunity to kind of go to Vienna for a day presented itself, and it's a place that I've always kind of fancied going along to, and when I see it kind of showcased in kind of one of my favourite movies, sort of before Sunrise, it's been one of these places I've always just quite fancied visiting and kind of walking around. And we took a 3-hour bus journey there. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to have taken the train in, but the train was like £70 more expensive than the bus, so kind of had to substitute the kind of the romance of the train for the slog of the bus. But it was really good to kind of go around and visit kind of quite a few of the locations really in Before Sunrise. And I know obviously you yourself, you're kind of a film location kind of buff, but it was really good to kind of see how it all kind of fits together, whether it does or doesn't kind of come together. And I got to visit the location where they sit and have their meal and exchange the phone calls, the balcony overlooking the opera house, the record shop, Alton New, even got my tote bag, the bridge where they get to learn about the play, went on the iconic Ferris wheel, sat outside and had coffee and tea and a bit of cake at the place where they meet the Gypsy Palm reader. And there was quite a few other different locations we'd pass by, little cafes or clubs. We only had like 14 hours or whatever there. It wasn't the longest one. Well, I think it was less than that. It was like maybe 9 hours, but we didn't have all the time in the world to visit some of the locations. And kind of funnily enough, when we were getting the bus back to Budapest, we actually passed by the club with the pinball machines that they go into later in the movie. I just kind of looked out my window and I saw the prominent graffiti, and I was like, oh, there's another location. Just tick that one off in the bus. And I always just think it's so exciting, kind of with something like Vienna, it wasn't so much thinking like, let's go to Vienna and visit these locations. It was like, you've got a kind of day in this place, and there's a film that kind of showcases how nice it is to sort of walk around and sort of using that film as a bit of a template. And it's so nice to sort of put yourself into those shoes and see some of the sights. And I thought it was just a great way to kind of spend a day in Vienna. And I'd love to I haven't been to Paris in a good few years really, and I've always wanted to visit the Shakespeare's bookshop and things like that. So yeah, it was great to visit these locations and kind of come back with a lot of exciting memories. I did manage to convince my girlfriend to pose with me for one photo, but when we were in the restaurant where they do the phone call, I was like, Joe, right, why don't you kind of pose with me, we can do the phone call. She was like, no, I've done one, that's enough. So it was an experience, and it's certainly one that I'll always remember.
I know. I mean, I was following your progress on Instagram and Twitter, and I did wonder what your girlfriend would have made of it. Basically, was she happy to follow you around as you led her around all the different spots and stuff like that, or were there things that she wanted to do in Vienna that?
No, it was very much carte. I got kind of carte blanche for the day. It was a place that I've always wanted to go, and she was quite happy to go with kind of the flow. And we did some bits and pieces sort of in between visiting these locations, and she enjoyed it. Sort of probably more indulged me, and I think that's probably an experience me and you are both used to, is sometimes just being indulged. Yes,
I think my wife certainly would have probably wanted to maybe split the day half and half, where we could do some stuff for me, some stuff for her. But she does love taking photos, so I'm at least she would have indulged me as I look to pose, and probably would have given her the printouts and screenshots of every single thing, so I could try and match up as perfectly as I could. Because I think, did you say you met a Japanese couple or something? And the record shop that were trying to do that exact thing of basically getting it perfect shot for shot.
I did indeed. I did that, and I didn't really have time to do that. Like, in an ideal world, I would have done that. Like, if I was with someone that was like properly into it and, you know, kind of wanted to kind of capture the scenes. Like, I did that kind of in Chicago with The Dark Knight with Mike. With Joe, it would have been kind of pushing it a bit too much. You know, you could go to some of these locations, say like the record shop, but you can't spend too long there. I mean, at one point, I kind of had to go back to one location. I can say this because she's never listened to a podcast in her life, but I went to the record shop and I was quite enamored with one of the tote bags, and I thought that's a really good bit of kind of memorabilia from the film that you can get. And I posted a picture online, and a friend of ours kind of went, "Oh, can you get me one of those tote bags?" So we were sitting in a park nearby, just near kind of one of the fine art galleries which does feature in the film. So we were sitting in the park, and I was like, you know, I'm just gonna go kind of up there and just take a picture. I'll be back in about 15 minutes. So I quickly ran back to the record shop, bought 2 of the tote bags, and you know, I was told I was strictly not allowed to buy this tote bag. It would be, I've got too many tote bags from all these festivals I go to. But when I was there, I did see this Asian couple with like the photos of them at the record shop, and they were getting it kind of angled quite well. And even when we were at the restaurant, you know, it's the third booth that's next to the bar that they sat at. We had to make do with the fourth, because it was quite a quiet restaurant, but there was a kind of some French tourists that had booked that third booth on purpose. So you could sort of go into these places, pick up on some of the fandom of people that have clearly visited Vienna or used it as an excuse to kind of visit some of these locations. And it really is quite impressive what kind of being showcased in a film can actually do for, you know, a random record shop, a restaurant that, you know, it could be popular still, but it might actually be something that keeps it going forever. And I think that's sometimes the magic of film locations.
Absolutely. I mean, we've sort of seen it recently now in Edinburgh, following Avengers Infinity War. For anyone who's sort of seen the film, and the sort of sequence where Scarlet Witch gets thrown through a window on in sort of Old Town, Layla's Bistro, I think it is called. They now have proudly displayed in the window that, you know, as featured in Avengers Infinity War and stuff like that. So absolutely, I mean, there's certain places will embrace and basically milk it for any penny it's worth. I'm sure there's some that might get fed up with a constant sort of trail of tourists sort of coming in and sort of taking photos and maybe not buying anything and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's the kind of thing which I've done before. Even in like local places like Glasgow, I got my wife to basically pose for photos on the Tron Gate, basically the sort of street where Scarlett Johansson trips over and falls. I didn't make her trip over and fall, and under for repeating the scene and Under the Skin, but basically lined up the shots to try and get as perfect as it was, and basically, you know, stood behind her going down the escalator in the Buchanan Gallery shopping centre and taking photos and stuff like that. So, I mean, and that's the sort of point where she puts up with me. I would basically say it's probably putting up with me, and then, like you say, indulging us for these very geeky moments that we like to do. But I mean, certainly, when talking about sort of the couples who spend ages sort of lining up shots, I would want to mention there's a great sort of Twitter account called Fangirl Quest, which is a couple of Finnish girls called Tia and Satu, who basically go around the world sort of basically screen framing. They basically have the film sort of paused on their iPad and basically line it up perfectly in the real life location. So yeah, I mean it's astounding how good the work is, because I mean I tried it once in New York, and just the glare I got on the iPad and stuff like that just made it far too difficult to do. So I mean, the time and effort that they go to finding these locations and stuff like that, and getting the sort of perfect screen grab moment is great. So if you sort of search Fangirl Quest on Twitter, you'll be able to find them, and they've got some great work. I mean, they've done Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Harry Potter's, Avengers, all this sort of stuff. So it's certainly worth checking out if that's your kind of thing as well.
Definitely.
Excellent. So we're talking about film locations and places that, you know, you've been I've been, as I think we've mentioned before on the show, I wrote a film location guide to New York back in sort of 2009. I've been every year for the last 10 years, and it's my favourite city in the world. And as a film fan, the first time I went, it was like, I'd recognise the odd place, and I was like, oh no, actually, it would be really good for someone like me is knowing where everything was. So sort of the inspiration came to sort of do a film location book. So I went over with my dad one summer, and we spent sort of 3 days walking for essentially about a marathon every day around New York. Basically, I had a list of all these locations, and his job was basically to follow me around, to basically point his camera and shoot. He would sometimes ask, what he was taking photos of, and I'd basically have to say, oh, this is the house that was in, I Am Legend and stuff like that. But, he enjoyed it, and, it was a great experience. But, the top 5 film locations that we want to talk about is going to be locations that we want to visit. We can't have already visited them, that we want to visit. So do you want to kick us off and tell us what locations you'd still like to visit? I expect one of them might have already been mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it was quite a hard one to think about, because I always think of James Bond in particular, where it's always sort of these different locations and seeing things kind of incredible and larger than life. And in a way, when you're kind of younger, sort of James Bond is like the ultimate kind of travel log in a way for kind of seeing these places and locations. And it's a hard one to pick, and I'm almost going to sort of get the easy with it, kind of cop out of the way first. But kind of my number 5 would be sort of the world through James Bond. And I you kind of see some of these European locations, these beaches in Thailand. It's incredible, and there's not really been much in the way of sort of James Bond sort of in the kind of the south of the equator. But when I think of sort of James Bond, I'd love to visit so many of the locations that he's gone to. You think of sort of the there's a place now called James Bond. I can't remember the name of the museum, but it's like Visuals or something like that, and it is based up on sort of the top of this mountain reserve where it's kind of covered completely in snow, sort of very much in that kind of Spectre style, where he goes to that clinic. And when I see that, I just think what an experience that would be. It's larger than life. It's big. That when we kind of think of travel kind of tourism, these Vienna, Chicago, New Yorks, it's easy to fly into. You can walk around these locations, it's quite easy. Where something like that, it's an adventure. How do you kind of get up to the top of that mountain? And it feels kind of like it's not just visiting the locations, but it's kind of embodying what it must be like to sort of go into that spirit of that movie, that kind of bigger, bolder and Bond, really.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I will let you off with that one, since you've basically chosen around 24 movies to to visit the locations of. But I'll let you off on that one. So yeah. So number 5 for me, I've picked one which is a very iconic building, but I think staying there would be slightly different experience. And I've picked the Timberline Lodge in Colorado in America. Now, for people who don't recognize that name, it might recognize it by its film name, which was the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Now, this is the hotel which played the exterior of the Overlook. However, it was not the interior of the hotel. That was all built on a soundstage back in London. So you would get to visit the Overlook Hotel, but you wouldn't be staying in the Overlook Hotel. And I expect that due to The Shining, they probably don't have a room 237, but I think it's one of those sort of places which The Shining is one of my favourite horror films, and I think I would love to just be able to visit it and sort of see the inspiration for this amazing creepy hotel.
Yeah, it's one of these ones that's so iconic, and I think it's probably on so many people's lists of places to go. And I would love to kind of read about an experience there, and I wonder if I can only imagine what their carpets are like there.
I imagine they've probably got at least one. There's probably one room which they rent out to Shining fans, which has got the carpet and stuff. Although I don't know if they'd have the green avocado bathroom, and there's an old lady staying in there when you first arrive and stuff like that. But maybe they've got a maze as well, but who knows. But so what would your number 4 film location be?
Yeah, it's one of these places that seems to have kind of stuck in my head and seems to have become sort of quite famous now in its own right, and it's the Magic Castle Inn from the Florida Project. So it's one of these movies where, you know, I for people that haven't seen kind of the Florida Project was the original name for sort of Disneyland, and in and around sort of this magic kingdom where tourists all descend and come for the roller coaster experience or seeing Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, etc. Like, there's all these different sort of tacky hotels that are kind of competing to stand out against each other, and you know, I've been to Florida a couple of times myself, and I kind of have some memories of all these different sort of touristy places like where people can stay, and some of them are very much varying in kind of quality, and this one has kind of become famous in its own right. You know, this kind of garishly pinky purple kind of magic castle where it has that sort of really sort of down market Disney flavor, and I'd love to visit it and see it. And it's one of these movies that I think doesn't shy away from what it must be like to sort of be poor, and in a lot of these hotels, kind of probably what much like we do kind of here in the UK, that's where a lot of people that are kind of maybe a bit homeless or, you know, down on their luck, and they're put up by sort of the state and are put into these places and slightly supported. So it's always a mixture of sort of, you know, tourists and sort of people really struggling kind of on the poverty line. And it would be really interesting to visit this sort of kind of garish hotel that's become sort of so famous. It's now almost become a tourist landmark in itself, right on kind of the doorstep of the Magic Kingdom itself.
Yeah, I know. And there's that amazing scene in the film where, you know, they know what they're doing by calling it the Magic Castle, because there's a scene where, you know, the honeymoon couple arrive one night and the guy thinks he's booked into the Magic Kingdom, and it's actually the Magic Castle, and the wife is like refusing to stay there and stuff like that. So yeah, it really is sort of shows like the two sides of the world of living in Florida and just outside that sort of Disney thing. Because yeah, a lot of the people working there are the people who work in the Disney theme parks, but at night they have to come home and stay in these sort of squalid, cheap conditions and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a real eye opener on the flip side of the magical world of Disney. So
absolutely.
Cool. So my number 4 pick, and I'm going for, again, I'm maybe slightly cheating here, but I'm going just. I'm
choosing with the world as well.
No, it's one specific city. I'm going for Bruges from In Bruges. So
I had that as well. Yes.
You got in? Yeah. So I couldn't narrow it down to one single location, but you know, just as soon as I saw that film, it was like I would really want to go there. I'm like Rafe Fiennes, you know, I'd like to go to Bruges again before I die. Lovely canals and that. Yeah, the mist coming across the canals. Yeah, lovely place. I'd like to visit all the alcoves and the nooks and crannies and stuff like this. And you know, I don't know if they've got a bowling alley yet, but if they did, you know, I would. But it's the kind of place that I just would love to spend like a weekend. You know, my wife's like, "Why would you want to go there? You don't even drink, really." So I mean,
yeah,
like, why would I want to go somewhere where, you know, basically the minute the beer is like starts at like 10 to 11%, but you know, I'd still like to go and hang out. It just seems like a really sort of chilled, quiet place to go. You know, you can see drops of Jesus's blood. You can go up the big tall tower and stuff like that, and just basically pretend that you're in Bruges and, you know, wait for a fat American to have a heart attack on the steps and stuff like that.
Yeah, like it's one of these places. Like, I always think when I kind of watched that movie for the first time, I'd never really heard of the word place Bruges, to be honest with me. Maybe that's a little bit of ignorance from myself there, but like I never really heard of it. And ever since that movie, everyone's always kind of going, you know, I'd love to go Bruges, and everyone always seems to say it because of having seen this movie, and everyone seems to kind of, you know, I don't like, for a film that made next to no impact really at the box office, I think with kind of Netflix and sort of cheap DVDs, this movie has like grown a huge life. And I think the Bruges tourist industry owes this movie about assassins killing them, you know, taking people out, for example, in you know, their little hometown. It has really brought so much money to that industry. It's not what people aren't going there for the beer, they're going there because, wow, that film looked really cool in this movie. And I think like it's unbelievable. Yeah,
no, I mean, yeah, for a film about, you know, two assassins, you know, hiding out, you know, they do manage to make a very dark film. They they still managed to make the city look absolutely beautiful, and Brendan Gleeson's character is basically really enjoying himself staying there. Colin Farrell is basically calling it a fucking shithole, and it's still in fucking
Imagine the
Bruges.
rest of your life stuck in Bruges. Yeah.
Stuck in fucking Bruges. But I'd still like to go, and In Bruges is one of those films which I recommend to anyone. It's like they say, oh, if you got any good recommendation film I might not have seen before, I say In Bruges. It's a film that convinced me that Colin Farrell is actually a great actor, especially a great comic actor. And I mean, Ralph Fiennes was a revelation in that film. He turns up halfway through, but he's heard on the phone, and I just thought it was Ben Kingsley again from Sexy Beast, but it was basically Ralph Fiennes doing his Ben Kingsley. And people sort of said they didn't know he did comedy when he came out in Grand Budapest, but it's like, well, actually, if you were there 5 years earlier and watched In Bruges, you would have known that he can be very, very funny. So, this is our tourist advisory board advert for Bruges. Visit Bruges.
Absolutely.
It's got lovely canals and that.
Absolutely. So for kind of my second choice, I've kind of picked the Grand Budapest Hotel, which when you watch that kind of movie, you think, well, that it must be kind of a huge science studio or something on Pinewood, but in reality, the lobby for this film is a German mall, and I'm going to butcher the translation of it, but Gortlier Wernerhus, yeah, so it's kind of, it's beautiful, really. You think of the Grand Budapest Hotel and you're struck by this beautiful architecture, the pillars, the smaller pillars, these different stairways kind of going up it. And it's very rare for certain things that with Wes Anderson movies, you don't often get the chance to kind of visit some of these locations in a way that how he uses a lot of kind of them. They're hyper, made up, and you think of, like, you can visit the Tenenbaum house, but then a lot of the different locations are kind of back streets. They're perhaps nothing kind of special, but through his eyes he brings them to life. But this is the one where it feels grand, it feels beautiful when you see it, and when you actually see the shopping mall interior as well, it looks still stunning as well, and it's kind of a great to showcase like the production design that they can augment this incredible department store in Germany and make it look like this hotel that looks like it's been built completely from a Wes Anderson dream.
Yeah, no, it's the production design on that film was absolutely sensational, and I actually didn't realize that it was actually a real life location again. I thought it was just like a soundstage, but I can now visualize how it would have worked as a department store. I think there's one actually in Edinburgh, Jenner's, which actually kind of reminds me of where you've got that big central sort of concourse, and then you've got the different levels up going around and stuff like that. So I mean, what city in Germany is it in?
I can't quite remember. I've honestly just closed this tab, but yes, you can visit in Germany. So just wander around German kind of shopping malls. You can do a book on that.
Okay, excellent, cool. So my number 3 pick is a big sentimental one from my childhood. Something which I nearly managed to do on holiday a couple of years ago, but unfortunately we were only there for a week and didn't have the time because we were at the wrong end of the country, and it would have taken about 3 days to get there and back. But it is the Hotel Sidi Driss in Tunisia, and it's essentially the Skywalker and Lars family homestead from Star Wars: A New Hope.
Wasn't that taken over by ISIS a few years ago? I remember that was a big thing. Yes, it was. It was a huge story at the time that ISIS took control of that neck of the woods, and it was going to be so difficult to go there. It was. I remember it was a big thing at the time.
Well, maybe it's one that I'll never get to visit then, but we went in 2014, and it was at the other end of the country. It's just one of those places that I actually looked, they did sort of these trips we could go, you could actually stay, in the place. I didn't know if you get blue milk in the morning with your breakfast, but it's kind of one of those places I was seriously weighing it up, but we were only there for a week. We wanted to relax, and so therefore we decided to stay, although actually, true story, we actually stayed in the hotel that basically the terrorist attack happened the year after, so it was quite shocking. But okay, now that you're talking about it, I guess now it does make sense that unfortunately that might be one that I'll never be able to tick off the bucket list. So
well, we can only hope that our brave troops manage to put ISIS to bed and we can revisit Star Wars locations in the future.
Absolutely. So I think you've only got one pick left, so I'm going to go with
That's
my
right.
number 2, and that is the Bradbury Building in Los Angeles. And it's one of those buildings which has appeared in many different films, including The Artist, 500 Days of Summer. But for me, it's the location of J.F. Sebastian's apartment in Blade Runner and scene of the final showdown between Deckard and Roy Batty. And for me, it's just one of those places which, it's still a working office building. I'm not sure how easy that I could get in and take photos, but it's just one of those places which I would just love to see in the flesh because it features in one of my favourite films, actually my favourite film of all time.
Yeah, well, we're not having to travel too far if we both go on a bit of a tour together. I've also picked a location in Los Angeles, and I've picked the Griffith Observatory, which can be recognised in Rebel Without a Cause, La La Land, Gangster Squad, Terminator, Transformers, Yes Man, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle, The Rocketeer, and obviously something like La La Land as well, where they have their date and they sort of spin up into the stars. And it's also in Star Trek Voyager as well when they go back in time to 1994. So yeah, it's a really exciting kind of location, and it was one I was in LA a few years ago, and we were going to go visit that spot, just as a kind of fans of science and such like, and we just never got the time in the end. And it's such a brilliant location, and it's one that seems to play such a critical kind of background role or kind of prominent role in so many kind of movies, things from La La Land to Terminator. It's not often you kind of can tick off many of that kind of a similar location there for all those kind of movies.
This was a location which was very, very close to my top 5 as well, but I decided that I would only go for one location from Los Angeles, but this was very near my top 5. It is a place that if I was ever in LA, I would definitely want to visit it as well. I remember it from playing, I think it's Grand Theft Auto 5. There were several missions that took place at that location as well. So it's one of the ones which, yeah, absolutely has to be a tick off the list. And so that leads us to number 1 on my list, and the place that I would want to visit more than any other film location. And it's one which I'm very hopeful that I will finally get to visit next year, and that is the Park Hyatt Tokyo from Lost in Translation.
Oh yeah, that was so close to my top 5 as well.
Yep, ever since seeing Lost in Translation back 15 years ago now in 2003, I've wanted to visit Tokyo, and I wanted to stay in that hotel. I've started to sort of research a trip to Tokyo, and looking at the prices of that hotel, I probably will not be staying in that hotel, but I will certainly be visiting the bar one evening to listen to some jazz and some sort of versions of the classic hits from a red-headed Australian singer, and having some relaxing times and Suntory times. But it's just, there's just something sort of magical about, I mean, essentially it's a hotel bar, but for me it just, I think I watched the film at a certain time where I was kind of in the same place as sort of Scarlett Johansson's character, and I just sort of felt like this was one of those films which had a profound effect on me, and I just love the film. This was Scarlett Johansson at the beginning of her career, and she's gone on to great things. I don't think Bill Murray's ever been better than he was in this particular role. He's fantastic in all the Wes Anderson films, but for me this is his high moment, and it's one that I would just like to sit down in and just relax and just remember the great times of watching that film, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one I want to visit Tokyo as well. I think it just looks incredible, and it's a place that if and when I visit it, I'm hoping to do it in a couple of years as well. That to visit that location as well. As you say, it's certainly not a place I'll afford to go to sleep in, but I will certainly be visiting that bar for sure, and hearing some, hopefully, and visiting all the karaoke bars and all the different places. It's so high on my list.
Absolutely. I was trying to think of how do I even go about trying to figure out where to go in Tokyo, but I've seen that Edgar Wright visits a lot, so I think I'm going to just ask him on Twitter, Edgar, what are your top 5 places in Tokyo that I should absolutely visit, and help create a list and do it that way. But yeah, it's just one of those worlds where it's so busy in some places, and then you can just take a train like an hour out of the city, and suddenly you're in peace, tranquil, with all the temples and stuff like that. So Tokyo's top of my list, and certainly the top of the Park Hyatt as well. So
Well, if people are ever needing podcasts to listen to while they're commuting around Japan, I can certainly recommend a few.
Absolutely. And if people would like your advice on places in Vienna to visit, or other film locations that they should see, perhaps in Edinburgh, whatever, where would people be able to find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo, and it's also the same on Instagram. And I've kind of visited locations from James Bond, kind of, well, UK based ones. No, I haven't visited sort of any global ones yet, but I've visited locations like Sideways, The Dark Knight, Before Sunrise. So yeah, you can see some of those photos as well on my Instagram as well. So you can check it out there. And what about for yourself? If people wanted to find out some of your locations and kind of find your book, where can people find it?
Well, my book is called Exterior New York City, Discover the Real New York on Location, and you can find that on Amazon. And if you want to hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, you can get me at Championship Celluloid, and you can read my reviews on championshipcelluloid.blogspot.com.
And we'll be back again next week with, I'm not too sure where in the world we'll be, or perhaps the universe next week, but I look forward to going there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think we'll be ramping up, getting ready for the excitement of the London Film Festival.
Yes, 3 weeks today we'll be there. I'll be there.
You'll be there. I'll be down in London a couple of weeks after for the MCM Comic Con, and hopefully have some good stories from that as well. But basically, I'll just be spending the next month, actually probably the next 6 months, in utter jealousy at what you've seen, because most of the films that you'll see at the London Film Festival probably won't come out in the UK until about January time. So I'll just be seething that I'm unfortunately sunning myself in Madeira during that time. But, maybe I'll find some film locations that were done in Madeira. I can do that. So
sounds good to me.
Until next time, it's location, 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 and we'll catch you soon here on Filibuster. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.